Right, good morning, everybody. It's 9:30 and the inquiry is resumed. This is day 3 of the inquiry into the appeal by Law Homes and Paul and Linda Buckingham against the decision of Basildon Borough Council to refuse planning permission for a full application for residential development of 269 dwellings, use class C3, 2 vehicular access points off Dunton Road, formal and informal open space, hard and soft landscaping, including acoustic barrier and associated infrastructure. Usual reminders, please: mobile phones turned off or turned to silent. Yesterday, we concluded the council's case and heard from Mr. Chard, from the appellant, and this morning we will be hearing from the Rule 6 party, and then the appellant will continue with their case. Does anybody have any housekeeping matters to raise?
No, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I have had a chat with my learned friend for the applicant, and yesterday there was a small matter that arose, which I believe that my learned friend is happy to correct on the record, that there was a statement to the effect that there was nothing within the proof of evidence of Lewis Reynolds, and the quote was, "Nothing at all about character, but as you will be aware, at 1.8 of his paragraph of his proof of evidence and the appendices do refer to character," and he's happy to clarify that point this morning.
Okay. Have you got anything else to raise? Anything on behalf of the council? No. Just one thing from me for the appellant, please. I'm looking at the TIA, which is core document 1.125. It might be because it's downloaded onto this separate system, but can somebody just give me the page references for the plans that are attached on that? The page numbers, because it's like 725 pages, and the drawings aren't paginated. 1.125. Yeah, so it's, yeah, just give me the page numbers for the plans. Thank you. Okay, so over to you then, Mr. Dudds.
Yes, and we, as you know, we're going to ask Joe Gibson to give evidence, but I understand that there's been some communication with you this morning about that. Do you have any objection that I join her and help her through with yes, I thought together we would come along.
Yeah, so that's absolutely fine with me. Yeah.
While that's happening, I can just give you those page numbers if you'd like. While
yes, please.
And the drawings are on this PDF pages.
Yep.
711, 712, 713.
Oh yeah, great, thank you.
I don't know how you will direct us, but the statement of Joe Gibson is obviously been provided in advance and take as evidence in chief.
Yep.
I've had a discourse with Ms. Gibson today and covering a few extra points in relation to paragraph 3. To amplify that point is that Ms. Gibson and the resident, so she gives the evidence on behalf of the residents. They are quite a wide group, a disparate group of individuals, but come together collectively to bring their evidence together to make it perhaps in a much more easier form to articulate. But nevertheless, Jo sits to my left, so potentially she can answer questions if need be. So in relation to the report for place services, obviously I'm aware, and we are aware, that it's not part of the local authority's case regarding the landscape and visual impact. And we can't go behind that because that is as a matter of fact. However, the residents wish to raise it because through their own lived experience, they judge themselves the spatial and visual amenity that they benefit from a sense of place, and that obviously that has been articulated in part in the witness statement, but we ask you to read that report from Place Services. No explanation is given to you why that was omitted, and we make no criticism because we accept it is the discretion of the local authority to, or whatever it wishes before or in the committee report. But we're of the view that it is an important document. It was commissioned by the local authority. It was in response to the consultation. We've exhibited it within the statement of case, referenced it here in the appellant statement. So there should be no surprises that the residents wish to rely on its report and contents. We particularly asked, although we're not going to go through it in detail because we know you would have considered it, but we particularly asked if you could please, when you're considering this matter, particularly draw your attention to the last paragraph at page 9 of the report that sets out the key characteristics of the area. And I don't know if you want to turn up to it, but in essence, they are set there for you. Then in relation to the landscape baseline judgments, we'll ask you to consider those pages at page 14 and 15. And lastly,
sorry, Mr. Daz, I'm just
sorry,
not writing as quickly as you're speaking.
I should look at your pen. I apologise.
Page 14 and 15, yeah.
Yes, please. And we'd like you to look at the page 17 and read that. That's more to do with the different receptors, different viewpoints. What the residents are not of the opinion that it's just local and there will not be harm. We're of the view that the residents are of the view that the site, if developed, will be viewed from a number of locations, and those receptors are set out on page 17, and that they will experience substantial visual effects as a result of the proposed changes to the landform, interruption of the existing open views with urban built form, and changes to landscape character. Now, of course, the residents have to place weight, and you'll place the appropriate weight that you seem fit on this report, because the residents are not in a position to commission financially their own report. So they have to place reliance upon this document. But we ask that certainly its conclusions that you take into account. We'll obviously do a closing submission at the end to bring some of the things that we've heard over the last couple of days together. To add just a little bit further to that submission of the lived experience, The residents are of the view that there will be harm to the character and appearance of the surrounding area. The site is will be a ribbon development. There is already a ribbon development there along the way, and located on one side of the road, with in essence open fields to the opposite side, except from the barn. And you will have observed that on your recent visit. There's limited services and facilities, and I'll amplify that a bit more, but certainly in relation to the context of the landscape and visual impacts, there are open fields and views that give the area a somewhat rural character feel, particularly as you head towards Dunton, west to the north. There is.
Sorry, Mr. Could you speak up slightly?
Sorry,
think,
I apologise.
The residents might be struggling. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm conscious earlier on it was really loud and it went down, so I apologise. There is housing, and obviously the residents accept that they're living in that housing. But once you pass that, it gives way to the countryside in a form of larger open fields on both sides, obviously with some cottages and a barn. And the residents of the view that any development that comes forward should recognise the natural environment of the existing character and the countryside. We've heard obviously views about the quality of the countryside, etc., but the residents give their view of how they feel about their sense of place. In relation to sustainability, paragraph 14 of the statement, just like to amplify a bit more on that, given some of the comments that were made over the last couple of days, to just give it some context. The residents of the view that this location, there's nothing sustainable about the location. The lived experience is that you have to use the motor car. And we've heard yesterday in discussion about the various modes of travel. We've heard about there's a possible, so there's foot, possible bus, but limited on its time and scale and frequency, and the possibility of cycling. But as I think it was said by the council's witness, that are they a genuine or are they a real choice? Because the residents, and speaking to the residents yesterday after those comments, the residents of the view that with a child in tow or going to the school, it is unrealistic in inclement weather. If you just look at the weather this week, to do that distance to and from school with young children and older children, them doing that journey on their own, on what is already been accepted, I think, from the council's witness as well as the appellants, a very busy arterial road, the A127. In relation to the point of the distances and travel, it is unrealistic in a society, and the residents say in their way that they live, to expect mum or parent or guardian to take up all that time that would take to travel to and from school, whether it's the primary school, principally, but secondary school, we accept that they would normally walk alone, but feel that there's a safety aspect there. In relation to the primary school, we've set out those distances. I think they're pretty much agreed that it's 1.5 kilometres away, and the nearest primary school is situated 2 kilometres away, secondary school 2 kilometres away. But that's the necessity for travelling there and back. In relation to socialising for the young people, residents have conveyed to Gibson and through to me that in the evening social activities, trying to get around, that you have to have the car, otherwise you are in effect socially excluded, because without the means of a car, you cannot go to the sporting village, the swimming pool, the 5 pitches. You can't travel to different places to enjoy social activity. You have to either be transported there by parents or others, or be picked up. The availability and the lived experience, so forget about choices. What actually happens today is that young persons don't have the ability to be connected to some of these facilities and services. They have to use the mode car as used. And the same is true with the adults, but I would really want to concentrate on the young person and what the effects will be for them on potential future residents if you allow the appeal. Now, in relation to popping to the shop, there's no such thing as popping to the shop over a kilometre away, unless you're using the motor car. You're not doing that by foot. You may want to choose to go and buy a pint of milk a kilometre away, but I think if we had a poll in this room, which I don't ask to do, but I think there'll be very few people that would raise their hand to say that they nipped out to the shop to buy some milk or bread over a kilometre away. And I think one has to be quite realistic that you're only going to go to the shop if you use the motor car. Some of the residents have made it quite clear that some of the younger children, younger persons, will not want to walk that distance. They will not walk that distance. I think if most parents would understand that most children want to be dropped at the door and they don't want to walk too far. So realistically, going to the shop to buy sweets or confectionery is going to be unrealistic unless it's you're driven to or delivered to. Now, we've got the points about the amenity in local areas. Now, there was attached to the appeal statement of Joe Gibson a number of planning decisions, and we to assist you, we've highlighted some of the paragraphs of those decisions we'd like you to have regard to. In relation to Benson Farm, I'll give for you the reference number and just the paragraphs of me. I've got it as CD 628. It's slightly out of reference to our appendices, but I'll give these references. So we'd like you to consider paragraph 3 and 7. Some of these paragraphs come from some of the residents working together, and these cases, so that you are aware, have actually been given to the Residents Association by the Billericay Action Group. They have collated them and helped. The two residents groups have been helping. So they have provided those. They are pretty much within a year of decisions, 10 decisions, I believe, of Greenbelt decisions within this borough.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Them. So just give me the references that you want me to look at. But I've seen them.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So paragraph 3 and 7
of CD 6.28.
Yes.
Yes.
And the point of that is that at paragraph 3, it's about no material consideration to the emerging plan. And paragraph 7 talks about the concept of openness. So just very briefly on that, you will be aware. In that it says, in considering the concept of openness, the courts have found that it broadly has two dimensions, a spatial and visual. This means that absent of any visual intrusion does not in itself mean that there's no impact on openness of the greenbelt as a result. Equally, this does not mean that the openness of the greenbelt has no visual dimension. That's really the only one that we draw particular attention to. Then the next one is 6.24, Dry Street, paragraphs 23 and 24. That references BAS or BE12, I think it is. It's saying that the policy is saved and has weight. Lower Dunton Road, CD 6.26, paragraph 12 and 16, setting out merging local plan minimum weight. The next matter is 6.27. I think that is well green. That GB1 safe policy, the inspector on that occasion given significant weight to that safe policy. The next one is 6.22, Grimshaw Farm. That's paragraph 43 and 44 about planning balance. Break Egg Hill, paragraph 2, limited weight to the emerging plan. The 6.25 Blackmore talks about Greenbelt being a protected area and talks about 11D footnote 7. And Lee Chapel Lane, 6.29, paragraph 2, local merging plan, no weight. And Glebe Road, I think it is, CD 6.30, paragraph 26 to 31, talks about the harm to the character and appearance to the local area and planning balance. And lastly, we ask you to look at and read in its entirety the Upper Park Road, Wickford. I think that has about 44 dwellings with salt. That's 6.31. And I think the one of the points that was made in that appeal is that the studies and some of the evidence coming through the examination process had not gone to public examination or a test. It's not been tested, and therefore that some of those studies have limited weight. Oops. Those were I believe, the additional amplification of that, of Gibson's statement. Is there anything you'd like to add? So I believe it's covered anything, and we're here to try to assist or answer any questions that that anyone may have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Simons, do you?
No, thank you very much. No.
Just one question for me on the appeal decisions that you've raised. Do you understand the difference between limited weight to the emerging plan and weight to the evidence base? And that there is a difference?
Yes,
you do.
I think the residents do, that they understand that there'll be limited weight, or if you'll find the weight, but on the evidence base, that's not tested. But the emerging plan, some of the policies have no weight, but some of the evidence may, or some of the policy may have limited weight. But ultimately, I think the point the residents were saying and reading is that, and reading through some of those decisions, that some inspectors have given weight, no material consideration, little weight. There doesn't seem to be a consistent path, but nevertheless, that's what we wanted to draw to your attention.
Yeah,
you know the difference.
Yeah.
We're trying to explain what we understand it to be.
Yeah, and I want you to understand what the difference is, because there is quite a difference. And I think in terms of the timings of those appeal decisions, obviously some of them were made when the emerging plan was still an emerging plan. There isn't an emerging plan at the moment. So there is a difference, and the appeal decisions we went through yesterday is quite clear about that.
Oh, I've now understood your question.
Yeah.
I think some of them were going through and applications were made when the merging plan was through it going through its process.
Yeah.
I think some of the decisions have been made after the withdrawal, so that
Yeah.
has a different view.
Yeah.
But in any event, I think it's under the, it might be, I can't remember if it's 169 or 149, but there is obviously the national policy framework talks about what say policies there may be,
Yeah.
and what weight, and that in any event, I think it's 137 and so on, we'll be discussing the green belt. From the residents' point of view, and I think we set it out in the statement of case, that the residents accept that there is an acute need for housing. We understand that. But when we were looking at paragraph 11D, and I think it's footnote 7, it was our view that that was about a presumption in favour of sustainable development, but obviously the green belt has a particular characteristics that protected, so that there was a sort of a hierarchy on those policies. But obviously, of course, so therefore, of course, you will consider whether there's very special circumstances or reasons when weighing up the harm versus the balance. And I know that there's been much discussion about that balancing, whether some things change it ever so slightly, but we don't see it like this. We see it very very finely balanced, and that there is not very clear reasons. We ask you particularly to focus on the landscape and the harm for the green belt for the residents, and particularly about the realistic and lived experience about whether this is really going to be an extension of a ribbon development that has very little access to local services, and the motor car is going to need to be used, because really that's the only way to get around.
Thank you. Council, any questions from the council?
When you say ribbon development, what do you mean? Because that's not part of the council's case. I just want to understand what you mean by ribbon.
Yes, thank you. There has been a decision. In fact, it was one of the local councillors that raised it originally, and the residents have taken that on board going forward. And I think it was raised before I was even around to discuss it. But let me just have a look. I think it's. You'll bear with me one moment. I did have a note on it from one of the councillors. 1 second. I think it was to do with one of the developments or Note Bridge, and in that it was raised previously at the council, and I think the residents have picked it up. So I think it was a submission made by Councillor Allen originally at the committee, and residents have picked that up, saying that ribbon developments were in effect out of town or away from town, that you needed to have the motor vehicle to which to get to local amenity, and that I think the planning inspector on the Note Bridge application talked similarly that some of the development near Note Bridge and around that area is part of a ribbon development, and in effect away from some of the local services. They have no services and no facilities nearby, and the residents are of the view that that is in effect not encouraged anymore. Development should be in an area which is sustainable and does have local services and facilities nearby and is accessible. And I know there's been much discussion. We don't have that expertise about maximum permitted distances. I think we just talk about our lived experience as residents. That's what the residents say about how long it really takes to get to some of these. And realistically, whilst you may wait for a bus service, or the bus, you've got to get there before 7 o'clock at night time or whatever it may be, the reality of it is you're not cycling. Most people don't cycle. Jo told me yesterday she's had a bike for nearly 17, 18 years and it's still got a really lovely tread on the tyre. So I think these are what the residents are really saying. In the real world, it's not happening. And one of the residents said, we'll have to ask Mr. Simons how long he would walk to a local shop and back to get a pint of milk. We've got to be realistic in the real world. And that's what we mean by that.
Okay, it sounds like it's perhaps a not quite right use of terminology, but I think I understand what you mean.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
There's no further evidence from Rule 6.
Okay, thank you. So we'll have a couple of minutes to get Mr. Charles sorted.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Mr. Charles.
I'm hoping there's another charge point there, is there?
Behind me.
Oh, great, fine, thank you. So, Ms. Ollie, I'm going with the original estimate of around about an hour, I think you indicated.
That's probably right, ma'am. Maybe we'll go a bit quicker. I did try to rationalise because I had an opportunity at the end of yesterday to go back over it. Would it help to indicate the CDs that we might go to?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. So 2.1B, which is a site plan.
Yeah.
Obviously, Mr. Child's proof 10.33 and some of his viewpoints. CD 8.50, the 2015 addendum Greenbelt review. Sorry, I haven't gone in order. 8.5, the LVIR. .2, the topic paper from 2018. And just briefly, the Livia LVIA at 1.122A. I'll try and keep it to those, if at all.
Did you get all of those, Mr. Child?
Yeah.
Oh, you did get them, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No surprises, I'm sure. I'll obviously give you time when we get to that. Can everyone hear me, by the way? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
If you can't hear, you're more than welcome to move down towards the front if that helps.
So good morning, Mr. Chard.
Good morning.
I just want to be clear at the outset, any questions I ask you do go to our Greenbelt openness case and not to character and appearance. I know there's sometimes sort of an overlap, but I just want to be clear about that from the outset. Now, as Mr. Fisher understands your case, who's obviously summarised it in his proof, and perhaps it's a fair summary I could put to you. The site, in your view, makes a limited contribution to the purposes of the Green Belt. Yes.
Correct, yeah.
So limited contribution to one, checking unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, because you say limited because you refer to the built form around the site, and secondly, development wouldn't result in the built form of Basildon extending any further north or west than the current established limits, and thirdly, as a result of the landscape mitigation strategy. So that's a fair summary on Mr. Fisher's part. And a limited contribution to purpose 3, assisting in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment. 2 main reasons: because the site's got a greater affinity with the urban edge of Basildon than the open countryside to the north. That's a phrase we see a few times in your evidence. And secondly, because the adverse effects are mitigated. Again, that's a fair sort of potted summary.
That's a reflection on what I said yesterday.
Yes, okay. So you've got a spatial loss of openness, but that's limited by the scale of the development in terms of their height, and the scale of the building is not being uncharacteristic, and the retention of open spaces throughout the development. Okay, so given that any harm to the green belt should be afforded substantial weight, I don't think there's anything between us that substantial weight in the planning balance should be afforded to that harm. That's obviously a matter for Mr. Fisher, but
That's
you're,
correct.
yeah, you're obviously not denying that there's harm because you find that in your
Just saying it's
conclusions,
limited harm.
but limited harm. Okay, so then let's look at why you nonetheless say that the contributions and harms are limited, and that's really what I'm going to explore with you. 216 to 220 in your proof, we touched on this with Mr. Hargis, and he said perhaps you hadn't quite acknowledged that there were some negative aspects here as well. And this was sort of reference to the housing options topic paper. Let me see if I can find that myself. So that would be 8.2. Hang on. Yes, sorry, a big pun.
Yes.
That's right. Let me just myself. We're going to be looking at pages 73 to 78 or electronic 77 to 82.
Yes, I have that.
Just playing for time while I wait for the download. Sorry, well, I can ask the question.
Mine's also, Basildon's on a go slow this morning. I think it's wearing away.
But yeah, just, so let's get so many tabs open. Actually. Oh. I've got there. Has yours come up?
No.
No, okay.
So you could just give me the page references, page.
Yes, so it's 73 to 78 or electronically 77 to 82. That's where it looks at policy H9. That's right. So see the site on page 73/77.
Yes, I've got that.
Okay, and then the consideration follows that. So just so on page 74/78, if you've got that, Mr. Chard, under the sustainability
I have that.
appraisal. So the positive point is, so we look at the negatives, but it says town centre regeneration. Do you think that's right? Because normally if you don't build on the green belt, then it would support regeneration. So that's a bit of a curious point, isn't it?
Well, it's what's stated in this report, so.
But you
Yeah.
perhaps wouldn't agree with that then.
Well, I'm not sure what it's trying to say. It says it's positive in terms of sustainability appraisal.
Yeah, I think we agree then. Okay. 75, just noting under landscape capacity, the site's got a low relative landscape capacity rating. And then it says directly under that landscape site appraisal, the site would be highly visible from the rural area to the north, the A127. There'll be significant adverse landscape and visual effects on the landscape character area, Upper Crouch Valley farmlands.
Well, that's what it says. Obviously, we would disagree with that because we've done.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
So obviously, yes, it does say that, but obviously we've done a more detailed assessment of the site, which I've not seen in this evidence base, which would disagree with those significant adverse effects on the Upper Crouch Valley farmlands landscape character area.
I appreciate that, but just looking at really just picking up, there are some negative points. I mean, we don't have to go through all of them. Do you accept that there are some negative points that you don't draw out in those sections of your proof? That being one of them.
Well, there's negative points, but at the end of the day, in terms of greenbelt under policy constraints, it says that development of the site would cause some localised harm, which we're in agreement with in relation to urban sprawl and encroachment into the countryside. But this is not significant when viewed in the wider context, which again we would agree with. So there are some negatives and there are some positives.
Okay, that's fine. All right. So back to your.
And actually, if I could just complete what I was going to say in terms of under recommendation, in terms of the officer. It says that the option, which is dealing with the wider site rather than the smaller bit to the east, is regarded as a reasonable alternative within the plan, is open to revision in order to create critical mass. It's recognised there will be some landscape and visual impacts, but the intention is that a larger allocation will help create the critical mass required to support infrastructure provision. So, you know, there's that as well as an officer recommendation, having given considered view to all of those negative and positive points in that document.
4.2 of your proof. This is one of the places where you say that the northwest corner has been left as open space because of the power lines, and you refer to this green gateway, but you know, you called it a generous offering of green space at the entry.
Yes.
It's not, it's a mitigation measure, isn't it, to try and reduce the harm based on the constraints of the site? That's what that is.
Well, no, it's more than that, isn't it? Because you've got pylons, so you can't build under them, but we're also recognising that there were views out to the elevated land to the northwest, albeit on privately owned land. There were concerns raised that there were views out to that area. And we've maintained an open area of land which will actually open up those views for the public and for the residents on that part of the site. So I think it's a bit more than just a sort of mitigation constraint. It's a considered design response, and that's identified within the design and access statement.
But nonetheless, it is also a mitigation measure. I think you accept that.
It's a mitigation measure, but I think it's more than that.
And the mitigation arises because of the constraints of the site, logically.
Well, it does, but as I said, there's a considered design response to those views, that open aspect that we're seeking to retain. So it's a double-pronged attack, I suppose, on that part of the site, that we're retaining that in open land, and it's quite a considerable area, as I mentioned yesterday, with quite a significant setback as well from the road that I mentioned, to the tune of any built form being between 43 and about 70 metres back from Dunton Road.
I think we're straying into other points there, and you've obviously covered that. But the site itself already functions as an attractive green gateway to Steeple View in the green belt, doesn't it?
An attractive green gateway? I would say not, no. It's open in its character, but I wouldn't say it's particularly attractive. It's an agricultural field.
Okay, well, views may differ, but assuming that the inspector's in agreement with that, it wouldn't be right that putting more intrusive residential development would provide a green gateway instead, would it?
Well, it's not. I can't see how it can be intrusive, to tell you the truth. The settlement morphology remains the same. It's not uncharacteristic of what's already there. It's two-storey built form predominantly, and it's set well back from Dunton Road.
Okay.
So I can't see how it can be intrusive when looking back from the north, where you really see the site in its, well, not in its totality. You see the western part, as I said yesterday, is seen in the context of the settlement. The settlement form won't really change effectively.
Okay. Well, we'll
because of the site boundaries. So it's physically well contained by either built development or roads. That will continue to be the case. So actually, it's consistent with the settlement form.
And you mentioned the retention of the tree belts in 4.3, but you're not suggesting, are you, that the retention of existing features is a benefit? Making a factual point there.
Well, I would suggest it is a benefit in the fact that it will be positively managed. So we're retaining the existing vegetation around the boundaries of the site and the tree belt within the centre of the site to the south of Sellers Farm. I would suggest that is beneficial rather than removing it.
Well, if you removed it, that would be a harm, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So retaining it isn't a benefit. It's just
yeah, but
we're going
to be positively managing it. It's not just leaving it.
What's wrong with the management at the moment then? Isn't the tree doing quite well by itself?
As part of a development, you would look at positively managing any existing and proposed vegetation. So it would be actively managed. I don't know what the management is at the moment.
No, I mean, how would you actively manage a tree belt? We just leave it alone, don't you? And let it be.
Well, no, you wouldn't. Not if you've got residents coming in adjacent to it, because obviously you're looking at the quality of the vegetation, the safety of that vegetation with people walking around that tree belt, and making sure that it's safe and it's got longevity over the longer term through management.
But are you saying that there's something wrong with it at the moment, or branches about to break off? It's not unsafe at the moment.
Sorry, can we focus on the green belt openness?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes,
the
indeed.
specifics of the tree. I don't
okay, well, it just goes to case. General credibility, but I take the point. All right. 4.5. You say that the landscape buffer will limit intervisibility between the site and receptors to the north, including the church. If you've got that at 4.5, then that seemed to be contradicted by paragraph 4.7, because you say that the strategy would be retaining views towards elevated lands to the northwest and the church. So how do we manage both of those at once? You've got limited visibility, on the other hand, you're saying you'll retain the views. That seems a contradiction.
Well, we've got, in terms of the proposals, a softening of the built-up edge along Dunton Road with proposed tree planting. You've still got that setback of 75 metres or so beyond that of open space, whether you'll look out on the view. So I think it's more about limiting sort of intervisibility. It's probably loose language, to be fair,
Okay.
As opposed to anything specific. I mean, I've stated what the clear intent is, which is to have quite a significant area of open space that still allows views out, but we're softening that edge along Dunton Road itself.
Okay, so that's how you would reconcile that then.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about, you said it was 4.5 and 4.
4.5 and 4.7. It seemed to me there was a bit of a contradiction there, but
4.7.
I think I've got your answer as to how you would reconcile that.
Well, as I say, I think we're putting in additional tree planting to soften views of built form and to enhance the landscape structure. There will still be views maintained through those trees because of the depth of that open space.
Okay.
It's not like we're putting trees all around that area and creating a woodland buffer. It's a scattering of trees along the frontage.
Okay. 4.13, just as a general point, you talk about measures beyond the red line boundary. There's no guarantee that they would ever come forward. Is there no guarantee of that?
We're talking about the area to the west of the site. So that is in the control of the appellant. It's owned by the same landowner.
You say that, yes, but that wasn't really my point. My point is that it's nonetheless outside the red line boundary, so we don't have any control over whether it comes forward.
Well, it's outside the red line. I mean, you could have a blue line boundary, I suppose, but at the end of the day, as I said, it's owned by the landowner and controlled by the appellant, so it could come forward.
It could, but my point is right, isn't it? We haven't got any guarantee that it never would.
Or it could condition it.
That proposed.
I'd have to check with Mr. Fisher.
All right, well, that's a matter
in
for
terms
Mr.
of
Fisher.
conditions. So,
Okay.
but the point is the principle of land being owned by the landowner and controlled by the appellant means that it could come forward from a planning perspective.
And again, arising from that paragraph, it's that same point really. Setting housing back, it's not a benefit, is it? It's a mitigation measure to try to reduce harm.
Yes, it's a mitigation measure. It's a considered design response to the locality and to provide substantial open spaces on the frontage to Dunton Road.
Yeah, so it's a mitigation measure to reduce harm.
So it's a design measure to mitigate harm, yes. But it's also a benefit in the fact that you've got a positive design response to the openness of that frontage onto Dunton Road, and in terms of the openness, the spatial openness, or the perception of openness on the greenbelt looking back, that you're looking at a green frontage.
All right. 5.7 of your proof. And you say there, the second sentence, that the eastern parcel is well enclosed by residential development to the east, etc. But then if you can, sort of keep a finger in that, difficult electronically, go to 5.15, where it says, as halfway down, there's no notable hedgerow along the eastern boundary because it's been removed and replaced with fencing along the rear properties in steeple view. So again, that seemed a contradiction. How do those 2 points fit together? On one point, you're saying well enclosed. On the other hand, you're saying there isn't a hedgerow, it's been removed, and we've got some fencing.
So sorry, take me back to, was it 5.7?
5.7 and 5.15. It is a bit difficult with electronic.
Well, I've
version,
got a hard copy in front of me. So,
oh, that's
so the eastern parcel is well enclosed by residential development to the east. Yes, existing vegetation along the A127 to the south. The internal tree belt to the west and Dunton Road to the north. Yeah. And then you go to 5.15.
5.15.
Yeah.
We've got no noticeable hedgerow along the eastern boundary. It's been removed, been replaced with fencing.
Yes. But you have got hedgerow along Dunton Road and you've got planting along the A127.
Okay.
So I'm talking about the north and southern boundaries, not the eastern, because the eastern boundary is already replaced and it's the rear garden boundaries and the fencing of the properties.
Yeah, so this is why I wanted to look at this point at CD 2.1b, the site plan, just to test what you say there. Tree survey. Did you manage to get that on the screen?
CD 2.1
2.1b.
B.
Yes.
The AIA. Yeah.
AIA, yes. Have you got that? Just let me know when you have.
I've got that, yeah.
Okay, so if you then look at the line there on the eastern edge, is that not a sort of fragmented and gappy tree line and hedgerow? That's how it looks to me.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. So where this is going is when you've got a built edge that's predominantly irregular or comprised of, let's say, less durable features, the green belt will play an important role in preventing sprawl, won't it, as a matter of principle?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Absolutely. When you've got a situation where the built edge is predominantly irregular or made up of less durable features, then the green belt has got an important role to play in preventing sprawl.
Yes, but I'd say we have got a durable boundary here already.
Even though it's fragmented and gappy.
Well, you're talking about the rear garden boundary of the properties on on King's Road.
In response to your points in your
Yeah.
proof, yes.
Yeah, and that planting along that boundary with those trees are relatively mature, actually. And you've got some, you've got some hedge. I mean, you'll see it on the site boundary. You can see it on my aerial photo, MDC4 as well, within my illustrative material. So I've recognised you're dealing with the rear garden boundaries of those properties. There are some mature trees and some scattered hedgerow elements along that boundary. That's what's there at the moment.
Okay. Back to your proof, if we could please, 5.7. And I want to talk to you about the ribbon development that you describe in that paragraph. Ribbon development to the north of the eastern parcel. Is that really to be described as ribbon development, or do you think you might have overstated that a little? It's just to help you out. The dwellings in question. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, all I was going to say was my interpretation of ribbon development is a single line of development on either side of a road, and there is ribbon development, albeit scattered, on either side of the road on Dunton Road.
Yeah,
and it's also recognised in the evidence base that it's ribbon development as well, as I understand it.
Yeah, I think we've got the same understanding as to ribbon. So I was picking
that's what
for the Rule 6 party, but it is scattered, as you say. We've got Greengage Cottage. Well, that's the other site visit. 1 and 2 Whelps Cottage, Briar Cottage.
That's right.
Which inset the north and northeast boundary, and they are separated, aren't they, by trees and hedgerow vegetation?
By the rear garden boundaries, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you've got Sellers Farm, the granary, and then you've got 1 and 2 Sellers cottages. And Sellers, yeah.
Yes. And you also mentioned the western parcel being slightly more open to the A127 to the south, well enclosed by Steeple Farm to the west, more open to the northwest. That's the end of your paragraph 5.7.
Yes, and that's demonstrated within my photographic material.
Mm-hmm. And it's true, isn't it, that the western boundary is set back from Steeple View Farm and therefore undefined?
It is undefined, and hence why we've created my MDC 6 with the western boundary treatment. But it is, yes, undefined at present. It's inset from Steeple View Farm.
That's helpful, thank you.
But the proposal is, as shown on MDC 6, to provide definition to that boundary with a hedgerow and hedgerow trees, as shown on MDC 6.
Yeah, because the boundary features beyond the site are less durable there, aren't they? So currently the green belt is going to play an important role in preventing sprawl once again.
Well, the test is unrestricted sprawl, and we're not resulting in unrestricted sprawl because we're contained on 4 sides by built form and roads.
5859, this point I'll pick up later about how the site is perceived. Does it relate to the urban edge of Basildon and or the open countryside? I'll come back to that. Okay, 510. So the site doesn't offer any public access and doesn't provide any recreational opportunities. I'll just be quick with this because it doesn't go to the greenbelt point. And you do mention the lack of recreational opportunities, but even though the site itself isn't publicly accessible, we've got a public right of way along the entire western site boundary, haven't we?
Yes.
Okay, so they'll be looking into it then, wouldn't they, people using that road?
They can look into the site from the northern part, I suppose, yes, and part of the southern part. I mean, you go through quite dense vegetation, and then you're having to sort of dogleg around the barns, actually, because at the moment that footpath cuts right through the centre of a barn, which is not what happens on site.
True.
As you then go to the north, yes, it's more open because there's no definition to the boundary in that location. So obviously they can see into the site eastwards from that right of way. Yes. and then the topography starts to dip down as you go down to Dunton Road, and then you start to go down into the valley as you go north of Dunton Road.
Okay. Yes, we've got the public right of way and a footpath, sort of 200 metres to the east from Dunton Road running north to Great Bursted, haven't we?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, would you agree that the agricultural landscape forms part of the view?
The agricultural landscape to the to the north of Dunton Road?
It's that what you see
I
when
mean,
you're,
yeah, obviously it forms part of the view.
Yeah.
So
important. My question is important to the enjoyment of recreational activity. If you're walking or hiking, walking your dog, taking exercise.
Yeah, clearly, I've identified that in my assessment. It's a high susceptibility receptor.
And I'm not going to that, by the way. I'm thinking of perceptual openness, just to be clear. But I want to get parameters.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. But all I would say is that one of the views that we've taken from number 7, actually, within my illustrative material, identifies the view back towards the site and shows that you're looking at the built-up edge along Dunton Road, and you can't see the site from that location. So that's site context photograph 7, Mark, just to be clear, on that footpath to the north east of the site.
Yeah, well, I'm not trying to cherry pick, but it's right. I mean, you talk about built development. The experience of new residential development isn't going to be an improvement to the enjoyment of views within this landscape, is it?
Well, if it's high quality, I suppose from an LVIA perspective, what you normally find is that your assessment takes you down an adverse route because it's built form. However, if you take into account the high quality architecture and the design treatments, that moderates that harm, and that should be taken into account as well. But yes, there will be adverse effects as a result of built development on an agricultural field, but that then gets moderated by the mitigation or the planting or the design treatment over sort of residually.
But even if the houses are of high quality, which I'm sure they are, that's not going to be comparable to the agricultural views, open views that you've got at the moment, is it? Sensibly. Well,
no, but then you go back to what you're looking at as a backdrop and the context.
But just staying with that point, you're not comparing, looking at housing, whether it's nice rather than nasty, and looking at an agricultural landscape.
No, I'm saying that there will be adverse harm at year 1 as a result of built development on an agricultural field. And then what you look at then at year 15 is how that development has been mitigated.
We're straying into other points. So 5.28 in your proof. This is a point that's often made about if you're in a car and you're speeding past, you're not going to look. But I think we do appreciate views even if we're driving and concentrating on the road, don't we? We can tell the difference between driving through a horrible built-up area and a lovely open view. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, and we've identified that.
Just as a point of principle. I'm not saying you have or haven't, but there's a difference.
It's more than a point of principle. It's the fact that yes, passengers will be looking at the countryside. The driver should be looking straight ahead of what they're looking at, but obviously you do look to your left and to your right. But the key point is a low sensitivity receptor in any event. It's not a high sensitivity receptor.
And then we should read that point there, shouldn't we? 528 with your 6.4, where you talk about when travelling west along Dunton Road from Kings Road to the east, existing residential development looks north over open agricultural land. So it's my same point, really, about the difference between built environments and open agricultural land.
I'm so sorry, where do I say that?
6.4.
6.4, first sentence.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just a point on the acoustic fence and in relation to openness. That's 5.30. So we've got new tree planting along the southern boundary, either side of the proposed acoustic fence to soften its appearance. But it does also further emphasise the reduction of openness, doesn't it, necessarily?
It will do, but the treatment of that southern boundary was in detailed discussion with the local authority. Hence, we produced the boundary document. You get fleeting, there's no fixed receptors there, so you're looking at sort of transient views along the A127 and along the footpath in any event. And again, I've got a photograph within my documentation of the view, particularly from the western end, which is a bit more open. But obviously those views will be curtailed as a result of the treatment that's required. And the topic paper 8 talks about the sort of benefits of that treatment in any event on air quality and noise.
I don't think we're talking about air quality. If we go to 6.2 of your proof, there's the point you make about whether one sees the appeal site in its entirety at any point due to.
I see that. Yes.
Yes. So, but the site is highly visible across both parts, isn't it? Particularly from the A127.
Well, I'd say it's
in its entirety, but it's highly visible.
I'd say it's visible. It's visible as you're travelling along at 50 or whatever miles an hour it is that you're driving along on the A127.
Yeah.
And you're seeing it, as you say. You can turn your head to the left and see the industrial corridor and the new housing as well.
Yeah. And of course, it's visible from the public right of way, but we've dealt with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got sort of woodland filtering views to the northeast portion. The southeast portion is far more open, isn't it?
Sorry, can you say that again?
We've got woodland filtering views to the northeast portion, but the southeast portion is far more open. Yes.
Sorry, this is from where? Whereabouts are you?
From the road.
From the A127.
Yes.
So yes, it's visible. I mean, I've got my photos again demonstrate that I've got views from 1, 4 and 5 of my site context photographs, which show the views along the A127.
Yeah. Okay.
So it is open. It is visible, as I've identified from certain locations. Interestingly, obviously in the south eastern corner at 4, it's more curtailed because of the enterprise rent-a-car location and the mature tree vegetation that you can see along that boundary. But as you go further to the east, it starts to open up.
I want to touch on the point about separation between the site and Basildon. Just look very quickly, if we could, at the LVIA. Remind myself of the CD. So 1.122A.
Yes, I have that.
So if we scroll on to PDF 28 or page 22 and paragraph 4.17.
Yes.
It says there, it's inaccurate to describe a strong sense of separation from Basildon. So that's what that says.
And that's identified as stated within the Basildon Outline Landscape Appraisals of potential strategic development sites.
Thank you for reading the rest, but it's right, isn't it, that the site and its immediate surroundings currently do perform a role in terms of creating a sense of separation?
I don't see how it provides a sense of separation because of the containment provided by the A127 Dunton Road and the development of the farm to the west. So I think it's tied in with the built-up edge and because of the backdrop and the context to the south, and in fact all the way along the A127 in terms of how you perceive it.
Well, have we got an identifiable sense of separation to the north by Dunton Road, surely?
We have to the open countryside.
Yes. And then surely the A127 also creates a sense of separation. It's an even more durable and robust boundary.
Well, it provides that physical separation, but not that visual or perceptual separation, in my opinion.
Small point at 6.5 of your proof about Carver's Farm Business Park. I think that's located at 850 metres to the west of the site. It's quite a significant distance, isn't it?
It's quite a distance from the site, but it was just talking about the other built forms and the activities that go on with the training ground for the football club as you come in from the west on Dunton Road, because it's there. So it's just a statement of fact, really.
Yeah, I understand. 6.8 is in your viewpoints. You're talking about more open views towards the appeal site from the southern end of Rectory Road. So again, I think that's just an acknowledgement from you of the openness from the north and northwest. Is that fair?
Yes, it's shown in the photographs.
Yeah. Okay. At 6.15, your year one, I think you've fairly made this point yourself. Talking about the introduction of the new built form will obstruct longer distance views from the north. So again, it seems to me you're acknowledging, obviously, the reduction of openness at this point. I'm just in year one.
Yes, but I also say it won't materially change the composition or the character of the views, only foreshorten it, particularly when viewed southwards from the higher ground to the north, which is what I said yesterday.
Yeah, but it's still acknowledgement of the reduction of openness, even if you want to qualify that somewhat.
Well, inevitably there will be a reduction to spatial openness because we're putting built form on an agricultural field.
Yeah.
But as I said yesterday, the way in which you perceive it in the more sensitive views is only on that western part of the site, not on the whole of the site. Okay.
And then at year 15, to be fair, at your paragraph 6.19, it seems that again here you are acknowledging the reduction of openness to the north and south.
What am I talking about? Well, this is about views, isn't it? So
yes, it's at year 15 as opposed to year one. I want to be fair to you and look at both sides.
So there'll be a reduction of views towards the existing built-up edge of Basildon.
Yes.
And obviously the proposed development will be set behind a vegetated edge, creating a softened edge to the proposed development on the edge of Basildon. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, 6.26, I think we've already covered this point in relation to other parts of your evidence, just the point about a substantial landscape buffers to soften and integrate the proposed development. So yes, it may have that function, but again, it does emphasize the reduction of openness, doesn't it? It has to.
Well, I'm not aware that planting of trees is affecting openness within the green belt. I think engineering operations are, built form, funds, etc. But you can plant trees. So I don't see that there's a adverse effect on the openness as a result of planting. I can understand from a visual impact perspective that there'll be a reduction in the visual, it might be curtailed a little bit. Obviously in the summer it will change in the winter and the leaves are off the trees.
And we've got the two aspects of openness, haven't we? The visual, perceptual,
spatial and visual, yeah,
spatial.
exactly.
Okay. So turning to spatial for a moment, let's go into section 7 of your proof, which is the predicted greenbelt effects. Of course, and I'm just really agreeing what we agree with you. 7.8, that's where you acknowledge the spatial loss of openness that there would be. You've fairly acknowledged that.
Yes.
Okay. And then this point about 7.39 hectares will be taken up with built development, but it should be remembered that much of this quotes development includes gardens and driveways that are inherently open. Gardens and driveways, what we really mean by open when we're thinking of the green belt.
Well, it's a three-dimensional concept, isn't it? So in terms of the abstract of openness, those gardens are open in character. So it's just identifying the fact that it's not all covered by built form. There are gardens there which are inherently open. That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay, but just to explore that a bit more, surely you're going to have a significant or substantial loss of spatial openness associated with what's proposed there, because you're going to have garden plots, driveways, cars being parked, fencing, lighting, all sorts of domestic paraphernalia.
Yes, that's correct.
That has an impact, doesn't it? So
that does have an impact, but I suppose what I'm saying is that, one, it's not out of character with what's already there in the locality, and I'm just identifying the fact, as I've said, that they are inherently open in terms of their character, really. That's all.
You do say in 7.9 that it's not uncharacteristic of the character of the surrounding area. That's not really a green belt point, is it? I mean, this is your green belt section, and we're talking about whether it's uncharacteristic of the surrounding area.
Well, I think if you had an energy from waste plant, for example, on this site, that would be completely uncharacteristic.
It would.
We're putting in built form that's 2-storey in scale. So in terms of affecting spatial openness, you're not putting in something that is uncharacteristic, as I've said, effectively, alter the character of the surrounding area. So, it may be in my greenbelt element, but obviously on my section, but obviously this is an LVIA and greenbelt appraisal.
Yes, it does overlap. It's got a bit mixed up. But I mean, what I was referring to, the gardens, the cars, the fencing, the lighting, swings, or whatever else, garden furniture. I mean, those are essentially elements of an urban landscape, aren't they?
They're domesticated, yes. There will all be that associated, all the associated features that you've talked about, which are characteristic of residential development. Yeah,
so they could be an integral part of urban sprawl, couldn't they?
Well, they could be, but they're not in this instance, because I don't consider it sprawl.
Okay,
to a significant degree.
Yes,
so it's limited harm.
So sprawl is perhaps an incendiary word here, but if you've got all those elements, it's hard to say at the same time that you're preserving openness, isn't it?
Well, we're preserving openness where we can in terms of the northern boundary. We've acknowledged there's going to be limited harm to sprawl, and that's because there's already built form, and I'm repeating myself really with the boundaries that we've talked about, and that's also acknowledged within the 2018 topic paper as well. So
yeah, I mean, we've agreed that you find limited harm. We've agreed that nonetheless carries substantial weight in the planning balance. Question for another witness, but my focus is on the fact that you've got a 9.5 hectare site, 7.39 hectares is taken up with built development. You're arguing, well, it's all still pretty open, but if you've got permanent built form, 2 to 2.5 stories across the majority of the site, then that is going to substantially erode openness compared to the existing open character of the site in the green belt, isn't it? We can't downplay that.
Well, I wouldn't say it's substantial harm. I'd say it's moderate harm on the site itself, because there's already built form on the site and surrounding the site.
But you wouldn't compare that to the 7.39 hectares that there's going to be. I mean, we've got some sporadic built form.
Well, we've got 2.12 hectares remaining as open space.
Yes, but
so
my point was the opposite one.
That's a positive element of the scheme. And they're in strategic locations as well.
Yeah, we're going to different points again, but you seem to be saying that because there's already some built development, it doesn't really matter. There's going to be another 7 hectares worth.
Well, I haven't said that.
Well, that was the implication of what you were saying. I put that to you, 2 to 2.5 stories across the majority of the site, and you said, well, we've already got some built development. Yes.
So I've taken into account the context of the built form, and therefore because there's built form on the site already, I can't see how it can be substantial harm. I'd just be saying it's moderate harm.
Okay, I understand. So that goes
On the
that
site
goes
itself.
to how you characterise the harm. I
Yes.
understand.
And in addition to that, we've acknowledged that there's harm locally, but not in terms of the wider context. That's what we're saying.
Yes, I understand your point about local.
It's harmful at local
than wider
level.
harm. Yes. At 717, I just want to pick up your point about overwhelming, not to play with words. The urbanising features exert an overwhelming influence on the appeal site. I mean, that's the point for the inspector, isn't it, to judge whether it's overwhelming or not. She'll make up her own mind about judging that.
Inevitably, the inspector will come to her own conclusion.
As she will generally, particularly in landscape matters.
On landscape and visual, and obviously looking at all the views that we've taken to assist her on that, yes.
But I have another point arising from that. Thinking about urbanising features, doesn't that seek to underline the fragility of the green belt in this location, that you've got those features already?
The fragility of the green belt?
Yes, that's why it's important that it's kept permanently open to prevent sprawl. We're going to risk the wholesale loss.
Well, we're only talking about our site, and I've concluded that there's limited harm. I've acknowledged that. I'm probably not the right witness to talk about the fragility of the greenbelt. I don't think it's fragile in this location and in relation to this site. I think this is a good site in relation to the settlement morphology, because the settlement form doesn't really change, and we've talked about the boundaries of the site are already contained by built form or significant infrastructure in terms of roads.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I'm not rewriting all of the background documents when I say fragility, but it's just that you refer to those urbanising features exerting an overwhelming influence. There's another side to that, isn't there? Like, well, what are we doing to? I think you've got the point. But your table 7.1, perceptual harm to openness. That's electronic page 40 or page 36. I don't know if we need to go back over your viewpoints, but we can do. It's 19, 18, 17, 15, 12, and you've set it out very clearly. But the point I want to agree with you, if I can, is that these are views from quite far away, aren't they? It's, number 19 is nearly 2.2 kilometres from the edge of the site. Is that right?
Just going
I'm just go back to that. That's fair to go back to.
Well, yes, it's 2.1 kilometres away.
2.19.
2.19.
I've rounded up.
Yeah, and that's where you get a view of the site, and they're taken from the public rights of ways that are to the northwest of the site on that open agricultural landscape, where there's not as much intervening vegetation as such in terms of significant woodlands as can be seen in the photograph, but there are a lot of boundary hedgerows on those public rights of ways which do curtail views, and in particular on 19, as I mentioned yesterday, this is a specific view where you get an open aspect view to the site, albeit obliquely. The majority of that route actually is curtailed by the boundary vegetation all the way along.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, I don't think anyone's saying that it's open throughout and there aren't any trees or hedgerows. 18, that's I think 2,100 metres from the site. You probably this 17, 1,700 metres, and then going down 15, 1,200 metres and 12, about 920. So my point, just to be transparent, is that not necessarily looking at very limited and local views, are we, when we see it in the context of those distances?
Well, we're not, but these were the locations that were of concern that were identified in terms of views from the elevated land to the northwest. So we went and explored that, obviously, and walked along those footpaths to see where you could see the site from. And that's what you've got within my illustrative material. So yeah, they're longer distance views, and that's the whole point, really, that, whilst there may be, and I've acknowledged in my proof, whilst there may be localized harm to near distance views, which are inevitable, there aren't significant concerns with regard to the wider views that were identified of concern.
But that those distances do show that the effects of the development in terms of the views and perception of openness are actually quite extensive to the northwest, because they do go up to 2.2 kilometres from the site. Is that fair?
They do,
Yeah.
but obviously you're seeing it within the backdrop of the built-up edge of Basildon, as we've already discussed, and the composition of the view, in my opinion, won't really change with this development in place from those views. So that's my view.
I understand your qualifying points, but my point is they're not just local limited impacts. They are relatively extensive, aren't they? If we're talking about 2 kilometres, that's a fair.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yes.
Well, yes, I understand what you're saying there. So obviously there are effects that could be perceived over a longer distance. However, the effects of those views, as identified within my proof, are predominantly neutral or negligible. Some of them are minor at year 1, but then they go down to negligible. So they're on the very low end of the scale. They're not moderate or substantial adverse, either at year 1 or year 15 from those distances.
Well, will form a small part of the overall view, and that's obviously a function of how distant the viewpoints are. So it's so.
I'd agree they do
double-edged.
form a small part of the view, and I'll reiterate the fact that they don't change the composition of the view either horizontally or vertically.
So you've got some qualifications, but you agree with me they're not local limited impacts. That was all I wanted to agree with you. Okay, 722, you talk about an acknowledgement there'll be an inevitable reduction in perceived openness for what we would call local views, near distance views. What about the middle distances? I've got in bearing in mind your viewpoint 11. That's 500 metres to the northwest, I think.
Yes.
And in places you have got clear views of the site along the length of Rectory Road and the public right of way.
So number 11, we're saying there's a minor adverse effect at year 1. But again, you don't see the whole entirety of the site. It's obviously a sort of medium sensitivity, low value in terms of the lane. And obviously it's a transient view, not a fixed view.
No, I acknowledge, sorry, just
sorry.
to be clear, I acknowledge, and actually, you carry on, I don't want to interrupt.
But all I was going to say was, sorry, as you travel further north, obviously your views are curtailed by the intervening vegetation, and then you come into the dip and then you rise up. So there's only certain sections of the road where you do see the site in any event. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was going to just remind you that my question was that in places you've got clear views. I wasn't suggesting that it was throughout.
In places you've got clear views to the western part of the site, yes, not to the entirety of the site.
So we're agreed.
And within the backdrop of built form on the other side of the A127 and on the site.
Yeah, I understand your point there too. Okay, paragraph 7.2. So this is a contribution of area 20 to the purposes of the Greenbelt. So that's PDF 43, page 39.
Just sorry, can you just repeat that reference again? Sorry.
I'm sorry. So PDF 43, page 39.
Of my proof.
Your table, in your proof, table 7.2, contribution of area 20 to the purposes of the Greenbelt. Now, obviously, the appellant was at pains on Tuesday to emphasise that it's more helpful to look specifically at the site rather than the wider parcel. But you do place quite a lot of emphasis here on the 2013 study, don't you, I think?
I do place emphasis on it because it's probably one of the most detailed studies, and it also gives transparency how they come to their decisions. Once you go beyond the 2013 study, things change suddenly from the council's perspective, but they give no justification for the departure from those original findings. So I'm just going through the sort of chronology effectively, but it is one of the more detailed studies.
I would take your point that we've got more reasoning, but one would assume reasonably, wouldn't one, that if they've changed their view, they were exercising their planning judgment.
Well, they might have been, but there's no evidence to demonstrate how they've changed their
but they
view.
would obviously apply their planning judgment in coming to a different view.
Well, they might have applied
We
their
might not
planning.
be able to understand how they've got there, but they would have applied their judgment.
I think that's the key point. We don't understand how they've got there, and we should be able to in terms of their evidence base. I should be able to understand how they've come to a different view from the 2013 study, but I have no idea how they've come to that view because it's completely different.
Yeah, but
and it doesn't explain to me how they've done it.
But nonetheless, you've got to acknowledge that's quite a long time ago now. And we have got more recent assessments. I hear what you're saying. You prefer the
Well,
reasoning.
we've got the 2018 study.
And of course, 2013 one is talking about area 20.
It's talking about the
okay.
parcel 20 area, yes.
Right.
And it says it does not meet the purpose for sprawl.
I know what it says, but I'm just saying it's talking about area 20, yes.
Yes.
And then you were asked in chief yesterday why it's better to do a site-specific assessment rather than a wider one. Now, I'm not criticising the authors of this, because obviously area 20 at the time was what they're supposed to be looking at. But you said, if I can quote you, and I have got a verbatim note, I hope you this chimes with you. Yeah, you said you should look at the site itself, otherwise the contribution of the site to the green belt is going to be smaller in looking at a wider parcel of a far larger area. So you need to zoom down to how the site contributes to that wider parcel. So that was my note of what you said. So just in terms of what Mr. Reynolds was talking about, so he's taken a point against himself, hasn't he? If he's looking at a wider case, and he's going to get a lesser impact. He's looking at you could call it worst case scenario, or a poorer case for himself than if he'd focused down narrowly on the site. You see the point? I can repeat it.
I think I do. I mean, I suppose my point is that you've got to look at it at a more refined level, which Mr. Reynolds, I don't believe has
yes,
done.
but the reason why it was because you're going to miss adverse impacts. Otherwise, if you're looking at a wider area, it's going to it might be more dilute. That's what I understand your answer to mean. You said you look at the site itself. Otherwise, the contribution of the site to the green belt is going to be smaller. If you look at a wider parcel of a far larger area, so you zoom down to how the site contributes to that wider parcel.
Well, you don't need to be looking at the wider parcel, do you? You just need to be looking at a site-specific level to understand how it contributes, because it's a more refined assessment. That's what I
yes, you're going to get a weaker case if you look at a wider parcel. That's why you would refine it down.
Yeah.
So Mr. Reynolds hasn't stolen a march by looking at the wider area. He hasn't made a better case for himself. If anything, his case might be stronger if he focused on the.
It would be more appropriate to look at the site level. He's looked at a parcel level, which is what the evidence base is. We've taken it to a more refined level, which is what I think you should be doing, to understand the effects of openness of the site and the proposal itself.
Okay. I did say I think we go to 8:50. I'm conscious of time. I haven't got too much left. If you want to, I could take a break if you prefer.
Not much.
I've got a couple of pages, so it's only a lot less than half an hour, maybe 15-20 minutes.
Okay. Do you want to carry on then? Yeah.
Just wanted to check. Thank you. So 8.50. This should be the 2015 Greenbelt Study Addendum. 14 pages. So if we could go to page 5 or page 8 PDF.
So this is CD.
Is that 8.50? Addendum to the Greenbelt Review 2015. Looking in the list, look for the word addendum. Well, you can look for the number 850.
Sorry, I'm just trying to open.
I think everyone understands that it's going to take a while.
So sorry, it's CD8.
850, 50.
Yeah. Okay, I've got that.
And then on page 5 or page 8 electronically, area 20 is at the bottom of that page. Then it goes to H11 as the sub area in the draft plan, land west of Steepleview, Dunton Road, Langdon.
I've got area 20, yes.
Okay, and it does say that it contributes to purpose 1 and partially contributes to purpose 3.
Yes.
And we do have some reasoning there, don't we, in the comments column on the right hand side.
Yeah, there's some comments relating to the scoring.
Back to your proof, just got a few more points. Your tables 7.4 and 7.5, which first one's under paragraph 744, page 44 or PDF 48.
So I've got 7.4, yes.
So it's a contribution of the site to the purposes of the green belt. Okay. Thinking of the sort of robust physical features. So that's in your first column, going over the page to page 45. So we're in purpose 1. If you've got so robust physical features, that wouldn't mean that the contribution of a site to a greenbelt purpose is limited in itself, would it?
Sorry, are we on page 44 or page 45?
44 to 45, over the page 45.
Oh yeah, boundaries of the site, robust physical features, yes.
Yeah.
And sorry, what's your question?
That in itself wouldn't mean that the contribution of a site to a greenbelt purpose is limited.
Well, I'm saying that, as it says there, because you've got robust physical boundaries, sprawl can be designed out. You're not going to result in unrestricted sprawl, or through a considered master planning process, which is what we've done. So you can design it out, and you've also got the robust boundary features to avoid unrestricted sprawl.
Yeah, that's helpful. So also the A127, so strongly and physically defined as a permanent boundary. So I think we would agree then it prevents sprawl from the south.
Yes.
And the green belt further functions as an additional barrier to sprawl. That's
yes,
fairly trite point. Okay. So it could be then that the site does contribute far more strongly to purpose 1 than you judge. I don't expect you to agree, but it's a reasonable view, isn't it?
Well, I don't agree, and I don't see how it can.
Well, for those
through
reasons.
The points that I've raised.
Oh, all right. I'll make submissions then. You talk about precedent. I think again they're staying there. There's a clear precedent for development to the south of Dunton Road. So I was just wondering about the relevance of that, given that we're talking about greenbelt here rather than character and appearance. We don't want to get a cumulative impact, do we, of development?
No, but I'm just saying that there is a clear precedent for development south of Dunton Road, as identified with the development to the east.
Yes, but my question: if we're not talking about character and appearance, we're talking about greenbelt. Why would that be essentially a point in your favour? It seems an odd point to make in a greenbelt context.
Because I think it demonstrates that the built form that we're putting on the site is not uncharacteristic, and therefore spatial harm to openness is is more acceptable because of its context than if you were in a more rural location. You've already got a context of built form that demonstrates that development of this type is acceptable.
But surely, with respect, you're mixing up two points there. You're talking about, it's not going to be uncharacteristic. So I don't know, broadly, I suppose people aren't going to mind. But that's obviously going to have an impact on spatial openness if you put more. I just don't understand why you're making a precedent point when we're talking about the green belts.
Well, it's about the context, I suppose. That's I've just raised it because there's obviously from a green belt perspective, obviously we've been talking about the impact of development on the near, the middle of the longer distance views. We've acknowledged that there is harm to openness of the site itself, but obviously in terms of the wider context, there's obviously built form there of the same character, and you're not going to result in sprawl to the east. So you've got well-contained boundaries on all four sides, effectively.
Okay, again, that's obviously a separate point, but so the built form of the same character is one of the points you would
Yes.
reliance on. Okay, I mean, you've got the same point in relation to purpose 3, because you refer there to the already being residential neighbourhoods to the east and along Dunton Road. So same point, really. I don't want to go over it, but not really a greenbelt point, more of a character and appearance point.
It's more of a character and appearance point. So I acknowledge that.
Right, that's in the greenbelt section. Okay. 7.47, you refer again to gardens and driveways. I think we've been through that, haven't we?
Yes.
I put my point to you. Now, just briefly on the LVIR, because you did touch on that in chief. See if I can get the yes, 8.45. CD 8.45.
Is my 8.45?
No, it's not yours. It's Mr. Reynolds.
Right.
So CD 8.45. It's the LVIR.
Yeah, I've got that.
Okay. If you'd be good enough to go to page 10, please.
Yes, I have that.
Sorry, I should just make sure I've got that right. Just bear with me, sorry, I'm not sure I've got my right reference, right document, may not be the right reference. Size, I can't find it now. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, that was my mistake. I actually want to take it to page 7. I do apologise for taking you backwards and forwards. Yeah, so the heading site description.
Yes.
So we can see in the second paragraph, the site measures 9.5 hectares in size, large arable field, properties and associated curtilages. Further down, the sort of penultimate paragraph on that column, 269 dwellings. It's unmistakable that they're talking about the site here, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, there's not just the wider parcel.
No, it talks about the site.
Yeah,
Yes, because it talks about detracting features on the next page and topography, etc.
I just thought in chief you were saying that it didn't really focus on the site. So that's helpful. Well, thank you.
If I can just qualify that, it deals with the site off the back of our LVIA. So it's a review of our LVIA. So inevitably there's elements of the description of the site in this document, but the assessment is more about parcel 20 than the site itself.
Well, it's obviously in their mind, and they know what they're looking at, don't they? They know they're looking at the site. There's no doubt about that. We've seen, yeah, okay. And then finally, back in your proof, I did a search actually. I found this phrase that the site's got a greater affinity with the urban edge of Basildon than with the open countryside to the northwest.
Yes.
I understand why you might have repeated that several times, but it depends which direction you're looking, doesn't it? If you look towards the built-up area, then yes. But if you turn around the other way, perhaps not so much.
Well, I think it depends on where you're standing, but if you're standing on the site, is that where you're thinking?
Presumably, yeah, yes, I think
Yeah,
that's
so
a fair,
if
fair
you're
way to
standing
judge
on the
it.
site, you're well aware of the fast moving traffic and the audible noise of vehicles on the A127. You're aware of vehicle movement on Dunton Road. You're aware of the properties on Steeple View, and you're aware of other development to the south of the A127. And then you've got Steeple View Farm itself. Obviously, as you look northwards, you can see the open countryside, but we consider that there is a distinct separation from the open countryside to the north of Dunton Road than there is to the south. This is a discrete parcel of land that has a closer relationship with the built-up area than the open countryside. That's my view.
Yeah, when if you look at all the site plans, we don't need to go to them, I've looked at them several times, but obviously on one side, yes, you have got all that dense built up. Then on the other side, you really don't. So when you could look at it both ways, depends which way you're looking.
Well, you could look at it both ways potentially, but in my professional opinion, this site, because of its robust boundary features and because of its context, is more aligned with the built-up edge than it is with the open countryside to the north, which has got a completely different character because it's more an open prairie land as you go to the northwest, and then you've got the plotlands directly to the north. So this is a distinctly different character.
It's a different character, but then but equally it's a different character to Langdon and Basildon, isn't it? The same point would apply.
It may do, yes.
Yeah. And the inspector will judge who's right, of
Yes.
course. And those are my questions. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Holly.
Thank you, Mr. Chard.
I only had one question, which is being covered regarding the acoustic fence, so I don't need to return back to that. So, Mr. Dowes, do you have any questions?
I do, probably going to be about 10 minutes or thereabouts. So is that okay? I think it's probably good to have a short comfort break, I expect, for everyone. So that's all right with you.
Okay, so we'll adjourn until this clock in here is slightly fast, till 11:35 on the clock in here. Okay, so the inquiry is adjourned. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
I have a few
Morning.
questions from the residents. You said earlier on that the housing will be set back and that there will be, therefore, the residents will then have a look out to the open views. So those that, if the site is developed, they will look out to open views. Is that right?
That's from the northwestern area, yes.
Yeah. So is it right? And this is the drawing that we've been given, I think, by your colleague this morning or last night for the section 106. But it's right that they will have this view in yellow that I've highlighted.
Well, from the northwestern area, you're looking more to the northwest, but also north, and to the northeast. You would still maintain some of those views, not necessarily from the eastern side as much. Yeah, because that's more contained, obviously.
And you've described this in your evidence today as countryside.
Yes,
that's right. Yes.
Yes.
Is it fair to say that when you drive down, obviously being a local to the area, I'm able to assist as well. When you drive down Rectory Road from Bursted and you come to the end of the T junction, the views when you arrive from that point is all countryside. Yes.
Well, my view would be that it's all countryside to the north of Dunton Road, yes.
And if you're here, because there are actually, you might not be aware, but there are public right of ways up here at the New Road. And if you stand at New Road and look down, you see the open countryside all the way down. And obviously, yes, you do see the A127, but you see a change in its character to a countryside. It's rural, semi-rural. Yes.
Well, so I think from where you're identifying where your finger was, that's my view 8, effectively. So I think it's sort of it's along here basically.
But it's fair to say, I'm sorry, I'm not looking at your photographs. I don't know if you've stood there. I have, and that's why I asked the question. You can obviously see straight down and see the development site. I mean, it's not unobstructed. You're at that New Road, and the inspector can see. You can stand there and you look down straight down. You without a shadow of a doubt.
Well,
right?
I've got view 8, and that's at a point where you go into the dip on the road. You're on public right of way 49, and you can then cut across eastwards, and you're actually looking back up the slope towards the site. So you're not looking down on it at that point.
Wow. The inspector maybe can look from there, but are you saying that you can't view the site from New Road?
No, you can view it, but if you're talking about, are you near to the north of the Plotlands area?
It's actually because I don't know where it comes out. It comes about here. I've run it several times.
Right. Okay. So it's further up the road.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's akin to my view 11, Mom, basically. But if you go further along, there is intervening vegetation in that view as well.
Okay.
So yes, you can look down across the site.
Yeah.
From there, and that's acknowledged in my photograph 11.
Yes, and when you drive down Rectory Road and you come to the T junction, in effect, it's country lanes, and you're in all sense of purposes, you're in a countryside in a semi-rural area, aren't you? When you're looking there, and that will change if your site was developed. That's right, isn't it?
Well, I'd say it's urban fringe. It's not fully countryside. Obviously, the site is going to change in terms of its character from an agricultural field to residential development.
Yeah, so when you come down Rectory Road perspective, or if you're looking from New Road or from that angle looking down, it will change.
It will change, but the composition of the view will not change because of the backdrop.
I want to ask a couple of questions about views coming from driving on the A127. I've driven it thousands of times. When you drive along, come towards Basildon, where we've got that nice Basildon sign, you will see when you come to Steeple View, would you agree with me that, and the residents, that creates like an edge? That's the start of the town. That is in effect the start of the town. When you're driving along, you see it. Before that, it's the countryside that you see.
Well, I don't agree with that, because as you're driving along from the west, you're aware of the Ford Engineering Technical Centre. You're aware of other recent resident development to the south, and then as you come along the A127, I mean, I've got my view 9, for example, which is further to the east, then my view 5, where you do see the site, and then I've got my view 1 as well.
You've driven it, I take it?
I've driven it many times. I
Yes.
dealt with the developments of the south.
So let me rephrase
So-
the question, because obviously I'm talking about driving on the A127, coming towards Basildon.
Yes,
Obviously, yes, you have the Ford Research Centre, but that's elevated on the right, and you can't really see it. They do a 10K charity run there every year for St Luke's, the local hospice down the road. So we're all aware of it, and it's quite out the way. You can't really see it. You can see it. It depends when you're driving, but I'm talking about looking to your left. So as you drive into Basildon, it's countryside, and then literally steeple view is where the start, in effect, that creates the edge of start of the town. That's what the residents say. What do you say to that?
that's on that side. I mean,
Yes.
I'd take the inspector to the appellant's opening statement by Mr. Simmons. There's a photo on there on PDF page 2, ma'am, and it's an oblique aerial looking down on the site, and that shows the context within which the site is perceived, both sort of visually, perceptually, and I acknowledge that as you look towards the site, that you can see the site, you can see the arable field.
I'm just giving you an opportunity to answer that, because that's the residents' perspective, and we'll do it in the summing up, but give you an opportunity to say that creates an edge, and that's like the start of the town. Before that, as you're driving along, looking to your left, you would see open countryside. If your development is given consent, that edge moves and will start here at the start of so the edge is moved. Is that right?
Well,
Do you agree with me?
I think it's sort of holistic. I think
That's simple. Does the edge moves, doesn't it? It moves in effect by nearly 9 hectares. It comes forward.
so. The length of our site is 373.5 metres
I haven't got a clue what that is.
to the red line. Well, it's not much, I suppose, is my point. So you've got a site that up to the red line is 373.5 metres. This is along Dunton Road, actually. So it's a little bit more along the A127.
Yes.
So it might be 400 metres, for example.
My questions are from the A127 at the moment.
But as you drive along the A127, you're well aware of the other built development that is on the southern side of the A127.
On the right
to
side?
your right-hand side, yes.
Well, actually, that's your view. I'm talking about the view on the left. I must say, I can't say as a driver, I don't think I've ever looked to the right to see a housing estate on the right.
Well, you're aware of built form on that side. And the other point is, that as you're driving along from the west.
Can I just stop you there? So that the inspector will have a look. I'm just saying, I'm asking questions about the left. I'll ask you a question about the right in a moment. That is the old James Hornsby school site, which I've been to many times and went to the school when it was open. So that's the school site, but you're driving along, you can't see that from the A127 on the right. No, I don't think I've ever seen it driving. Are you saying you can see it? Maybe I've missed it.
I'm saying that you are aware of built development is what I'm saying as you travel along the A127.
Really?
Yes.
Right, okay, on the right, the James Hornsby school site, you're saying you can see?
I don't know, you can't, the school's not there anymore, is it? It's residential development.
I said.
But the point is that you are aware of built development as you travel along A127.
Okay.
The other thing I would just say, if I can, is that because of the bend in the road, because of the topography of the road, you don't get any sense of the site at all until you literally come to my site context photograph 5. So number 9, which is further to the west, and there's a lay-by for big articulated trucks. You can't see the site at all because you're coming up the hill slightly, and then it sort of bends round. It's only when you get to number 5 that you actually start to see into the site. And I've been quite fair in my assessment of taking the worst case sort of views. So number 5, there is an open view as you travel along there of the site itself, but you can still see the built form through the gap between the Sellers Farm and the built-up edge to the east.
Yeah, so
with housing through the gap.
So my question was, just to remind you, so we've danced around a lot, but just to remind you, do you agree with me that the edge that we say is created by the residential development at King's Road moves 400 metres, thereabouts, west, and creates a new edge? It does, doesn't it?
It'll create a new edge, but not one that's out of character with the settlement morphology.
No, so what you're saying is not out of character with the edge that's 400 metres down the road, but it moves.
That's physically, inevitably, it's going to move.
Yes, it's moved. And is that moving a sprawl? What's a sprawl? No. How do we? Because I put down earlier on when you wrote, when's a sprawl not a sprawl? Is that a sprawl?
No, because it's a well considered and it's been master planned.
So
sprawl in my mind is something that's disorganised and has not been designed in a coherent way. This scheme has been designed in a coherent way, and over and above that, it's got well defined boundaries.
A sprawl, using the Oxford Dictionary, is a movement, a spread. So it spreads, it moves from one to the other. You've accepted that, yes?
Yeah, but it's not disorganised or chaotic sprawl or unrestricted sprawl.
All right. Now, the next question I have for the residents is, we're talking about the site specific. The wider views from the A127 looking out will be harmed. So in other words, it does affect the views that you will see here, doesn't it? When you're driving along, you won't see some of these views here anymore. So that causes some harm, doesn't it, to the view?
Well, it causes change, but it is in accordance with and lauded by the council with regard to the type of treatment that they're looking for along that boundary.
In relation to some of the comments that you made this morning, you said it would be more appropriate if there was a site-specific landscape visual assessment by Lewis Reynolds. That's what you said this morning in your yes. So can I take you to CD 8.45, which is the Place Services Report, which is headed Landscape and Visual Impact Review?
Yes.
And that's dated the 13th of March. This is a site-specific review, is it not?
It's a site-specific review of our LVIA, yes.
But also of the wider site, isn't it? Because I think at the beginning of the forward, and it'll be a matter for the inspector. I'm not a landscape architect nor any of the residents, but at the beginning of the background and context, it takes a number of documents into account, not only just your document. Is that right?
Yeah, it takes into account other evidence-based documents, as it should, as part of a review.
Yes, and that so the residents have append this to their statement or their information, and Mr. Reynolds has referenced it at page 1.18, It's an appropriate document to consider. Have you considered it?
Well, have I considered this LVIR?
This 8.45 document.
Sorry, what is that?
That's the landscape and visual impact review. Have you considered that evidence?
Yes.
Yes. And I'll just take you to page 14 to 15.
Yes.
Is there anything in relation, say, to the landscape condition? Just medium. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think we come to the same view on that.
Cultural heritage, medium.
Well, that's what it says. Yes.
Yep. But I'm asking if you agree with it.
Well, I've not gone down into detail on cultural heritage myself to the level, because this is about landscape value.
Yeah. Okay, and then turn up, please, to page 15.
Mm-hmm.
Scenic. You see that the site would be judged in its setting as medium scenic value. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'm not too sure. I suppose before I answer that, I don't know what methodology Mr. Reynolds is working to come to his judgments.
That's why I asked if you read the report.
Well, I've obviously read the report in quite a lot of detail, yes.
So do you agree with that that assessment as medium?
If I go back to my proof, because we talk about value in there, I'll just see what we've said. So we've got a low to medium value, Mr. Reynolds. That's on character of the site. So this is dealing with value. So we've got a low to medium value effectively. And Mr. Reynolds has got a medium value.
Yes. Now, if you turn up to page 17, he identifies a number of receptors.
Yes.
So public points of view, places of work, private views, cottages, views from public right-of-ways, and the transport links or the roads. It concludes that the site will be most visible near mid-distance viewpoints within approximately 2 kilometre radius from the site, include all the above used groups. And I'm going to miss the next paragraph, and it says the receptors would be experience substantial visual effects as a result of the proposed changes due to the landform interruption, existing open views with urban built form, and to the change of the landscape character. He's right, isn't he?
Well, no, I don't think he is, and I can't see how he can be right, because I can't see any findings to back up that assertion. And I go back to the methodology, criteria, terminology. So he's come up with a substantial adverse visual effect. He hasn't done any assessment that's transparent for me to see, like our impact tables. So I don't think it is substantial. I can't see how it can be substantial. We've identified that there's near distance views, they would have the worst case of harm. But even at that level, I think we're coming up with moderate harm as opposed to substantial harm.
Do you disagree with him that the near mid-distance viewpoints, nearly 2 kilometres away, you can see the site from those different locations? Obviously, the inspector will be able to, forget what's written here and what you've written, be able to see that for herself. But do you disagree with that point?
Well, I can only go back to the views that we've taken, which are representative and specific views.
So you do disagree?
I've already answered the question once a minute ago, because I've said that the most adverse that we come to on views at day one is moderate to minor adverse from certain locations.
The residents also have a view that from Kings Road, looking west or towards Dunton, that they view, and I think the statement of Joanna Gibson, she says, it's no doubt the scheme would harm the character and appearance You only need to walk, cycle, drive along Dunton Road to west towards the location of the site, and you experience a marked change in character and appearance of the landscape, with a clear transition into a semi-rural character and increased sense of openness. Are you saying that the lived experience of the residents walking or travelling that distance is not that sense of openness and semi-rural character when you move past the King's Road?
No, I'd agree with that statement. There's a transition between the built-up edge and the countryside, but this site can accommodate the type of development that is proposed without substantial adverse harm to the function of the green belt or to character. And that has been concluded in the committee report and agreed by the council officer. Para 5.3.35, for example, of CD 3.1, it says, notwithstanding the development of a portion of land identified of high landscape sensitivity and some identified local level harm, the proposed development, subject to appropriate landscape mitigation, would be capable of being accommodated within the site without significant harm to the wider landscape and integrates satisfactorily within its wider greenbelt context. So that's in that report.
So
and then in topic paper 6, as we've already mentioned, the role of the remaining greenbelt. It states that it will continue to function as currently in its purpose because it won't have any harm on the wide. It's basically localised harm. We've acknowledged there's localised harm.
Okay, let me just come back to the 2 points that you've just raised. So firstly, you've talked about the built area, but that's moving. So that does have an impact on the greenbelt, doesn't it? It's moving 400 metres.
Yes, exactly. And we've acknowledged what the impact is on
the
openness.
Yeah, and then you just said the officer's report about greenbelt, but it has gone to 2 different committees and the elected members, and the residents agree with the elected members that they have refused it twice. Different members, because there was an election and change of committee membership, but twice it's been refused by the locally elected members who know the area. That's right too, isn't it?
I understand that's the case, yes.
Yeah. Now, coming back to the residents' view of character, it's right also to say, isn't it, that the seasons, the residents will experience and members of the public will experience different views that they see. So in sunshine, they may get a fantastic view of the countryside. In a day like today, it might be quite miserable to stand up there and have a look. But during the seasons, people experience different views, don't they, the residents?
They experience different senses through the seasons, yes.
Yeah, and that's important for to the residents of the character of the area, isn't it?
I'm sure it is.
Let me just check. I've asked all my questions. One moment. So I did have some questions given by the residents as well. Let me just check that. Yes, there's one question here from, sorry, I've had some questions from behind. Just one more question left. You said, for example, there's other land within the ownership of the applicant. And the resident asked the question, so I pose it for them, is that if there's the move of the edge and you move it 400 metres, what stops the same argument being raised to move the edge further? Isn't the purpose of the green belt to stop that movement?
Well, we're dealing with this site on its own merit, so I can't really talk about it moving further and further away because we're only dealing with this site. And this site has got to be weighed on its own merits in terms of its impact on the green belt and openness, etc.
Inspector, I have no further questions on behalf of the Rule 6 party.
Thank you, Mr. Dadds.
Thank you. Nothing on character and appearance, and in fact, nothing really on Greenbelt either. But other than just one thing, and I think I don't know whether it's the way I've asked my questions so far. I may have caused some confusion as to what we're saying and not saying. So let's see if we can mop it up, Mr. Chard, and to try and assist the inspector. This document 8.45, this landscape and visual impact review that was prepared by Mr. Reynolds, you were asked questions about it by Miss Ollie, and you were asked questions about it by Mr. Dadds as well.
Yes.
And both of them were very interested in the question of whether or not this is a site-specific assessment or whether it's an Area 20 assessment. And you confirmed that because what it's doing is reviewing your LVIA, it's a site-specific assessment of the various components of your
review.
LVIA. It's a review, sorry,
of our site-specific LVIA.
Got it. Yeah. So to that degree, it is site-specific, as you explained. I don't remember asking any questions that suggested the contrary yesterday or the day before that, and if I did, that was my lack of clarity. Let me just have one more go at asking this then. You've read it. You've said that you've read it in some detail.
Yes.
Does it contain in this 8.45 a site-specific consideration, not Area 20 or Area 16 or whatever, but this site, a site-specific consideration of our site against Greenbelt purposes and any harm to Greenbelt openness?
No, it doesn't. Not on Greenbelt. It deals with identifying parcel 20 on page 10 and 11.
Yeah.
It does an evidence review in terms of characteristics of site 16 through the Basildon outline landscape proposals of potential strategic development sites. It then goes site specific in terms of landscape value on pages 14 and 15. And it then goes into susceptibility and overall sensitivity of the site. It doesn't do any assessment, despite coming to a substantial adverse effect on the visual baseline at page 17. And then you've effectively got a document review, which is a review of our assessment effectively, where judgments are made on where they think we might be over-egging it or under-egging it in terms of sensitivity, etc. And then the last few pages are relating to a response to design considerations. So there's no assessment on a visual assessment. Yeah. There's no impact tables. There's no methodology to judge how he's come to substantial adverse.
But even moving beyond, I mean, those are all landscape points. Just taking then this together, if it is to form part of Mr. Reynolds's sort of evidence, I didn't think it was, because obviously it's a landscape document and the council takes no character and appearance objection. But anyway, if there's this and we add it to the proof of evidence too from Mr. Reynolds, so he's got both. He's got his proof of evidence and he's got this other thing that he's written as well. And if the inspector's happy to just take all of that stuff in the round as representing his position, has Mr. Reynolds put before the inquiry a site-specific consideration of the harm to openness or purposes of the Greenbelt?
No, he hasn't.
And has it come from anyone else?
Well, I'm aware of, no.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Simons. That concludes your evidence, Mr. Charlie. Are we going to hear from Mr. Wharton?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. It's either that or an early lunch, but I'm happy to press on.
I'm happy either way. So just so you know, the council have said we have to be out of this room by 4:30 today.
Slightly.
There's a meeting.
We could, we'd be happy also, I think, with a shorter lunch again. I don't know how everyone else feels about that, but 30 or 45 minutes. I mean, we could do lunch now and then just kick off at 12.
Okay. Are you content with who's here? Are they content with a half an hour?
Yes,
yeah,
that they are, and we're making progress.
Good. Okay. And you're content with that?
I'm not hungry yet.
It's forced on you. Can I just check that the residents who are here today, there's nobody who's wanting to speak, are you? Are you wanting to? You're just happy to observe? Yeah.
I did speak to the lady. I think she wanted to raise a point, but obviously I've said that will continue to ask what we are saying. But
Okay.
I think she wanted to raise a point about the road.
Okay.
I'll just let you know that I couldn't do that.
No,
because
that's fine. You want to speak to the inquiry, do you?
But it's very brief. I have spoken to her. It's a very brief point.
Okay, if you would like to speak, then please come and take this table here, because you have to use the microphone for the recording. Yes, sorry, thank you. Yes, if you just give him a couple of minutes to. Has he left the is it lit up there? No, you just press the button on the right hand side. Yes, perfect. Can I just take your name?
Elizabeth Baker.
Okay.
It's entirely different to what everybody's been speaking about, but it's still, in my opinion, and for the area, it's very important. It's Dunton Road itself. They call it road. I think it's more of a lane. And we have a lot of accidents, but I'd like somebody to take into account, maybe yourself or others who will be going to see the site, to take time in looking at the actual road. For the dip that goes down at Rectory, the little bridge that goes further over, which narrows, then there's several bends towards the other end of Dunton. Many years ago, we had calmers put down. Because the road isn't wide enough, they turned the calmers round the other way to make them fit. They're useless. With the volume of traffic coming from this new development onto such an already busy road is causing very, very much concern. We have had a lot of accidents. It is narrow. The wing mirrors get crashed. So I'd just like somebody to listen and take that into consideration along with everything else that this is being said.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you say she was a member of the Residents Association? Okay, can I just check as well that things like the openings, are they getting at who's responsible for uploading those onto the core documents? Right. Okay, good. Yeah, if we could get those uploaded, that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, so we'll stick with the 30-minute lunch then. So we'll go by this clock, which is 12:40. So we'll return at 12:40. The inquiry is adjourned. Thank you.